it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. And we're zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question. And that was really Peace and Harmony. I really love the videos that you do on the Covert Narcissist. Can you please do more of these? We've also received feedback that you like the longer videos. So we're going to go and try to go in depth in a documentary type of fashion so you can realize the different segments, not only how the dynamics of this personality type are within the individual, how it affects the dynamic within you, and then how on further stages it affects you for the long term. And that's where we really want to sort of interrupt the pattern. We want to do a pattern interrupt. We want to break down the process that has gotten you into a trauma bond, into a painful situation where you can't really recognize yourself. You can't be yourself. There's a tremendous amount of worry or apathy or guilt or depression. And this can be a resultant factor of being in a relationship with a covert narcissist. Now realize that on the outside, sort of a covert narcissist seems to not really need anybody. They can be very aloof, very withdrawn, very withholding, and sort of very much within their own fortress, if you will, standing in the ivory tower of their perspective. They seem to have everything that they need and that they don't really quote unquote need anybody. Oftentimes they can be very resistant to conversation, very resistant to making compliments, sort of opening up the jar of worms, as you will, that comes with conversation. When you get excited, enthusiasm, your passion, your life purpose, you don't recognize these if you've been in a relationship with a covert narcissist for a long time, because you're fully saturated, you're permeated, and what is really sort of saturated or penetrated your being is the feeling that you have to satisfy their needs. And your needs go unrecognized and they become adulterated or really sort of perverted, if you will, in a sense that then you have to develop a lot of defense mechanisms in order to cope not only with this person but with life. And so what ends up happening is your perspective becomes very narrowed when you're with a covert narcissist. It's like they're taking the whole field of perspective and vision and sort of, siphoning it down into one little slice, and that is really their needs. And these people on the outside, they don't appear very needy because they're not outwardly saying, can you clean the house? Can you get the door? Can you do this? Why this? They don't seem to outwardly express their neediness. That's what's so subtle, and hence the covert narcissist. They will have you at the love bomb. They'll have you at hello for a specific amount of reasons. Usually people fall for them in a split second, a split moment. You almost want to say love at first sight or something that they said. There might be something about them which just instantly clicked with you. And so you never looked back. You just heard go. And, it's very interesting, I would say, how these relationships are in the love bombing stage. In other words, where you sort of fall head over heels. And you could really, if you think physically what that is, heels over head, it's like you kind of are in a catapult or a love somersault for them. And so the covert narcissist, the problem that we're looking at and diving in right now is their neediness of people. The way that they have sort of supply surrounding them because of their withdrawn or aloof manner. In other words, you're going to attract some people who have an excess qualities of giving, loving, doing all the dirty work, doing all the yard work, kind of picking up a lot of slack for these individuals. You can raise your hand and say I if you have been one of these people. Do you feel like you're constantly picking up the slack for this person? Do you feel like you're constantly satisfying their needs? You can be sick, broken down, in a neck cast, and they're still, asking you to be supportive, support them. it just oftentimes is never ending. And this causes a good degree of worry in people who are in the situation in a supply role. Supply role meaning just you then become so opened up, you become so hollowed out to satisfy their needs that your needs don't become recognized. So when we really get into serious issues is when you're not able to recognize your own needs. You're not able to be responsible and accountable to number one, which is you. It's like their needs loom large. It's like a billboard filling the sky. It's really all you can see, and it's a distraction from everything else that's going around on you, going around you. And so the key I want you to sort of focus in on is the neediness of the covert narcissist. Once again, they don't wear it outside. You don't know really who they are. In other words, if something drops, they're not going to pick it up. They're going to wait for someone else to pick it up. And then they'll treat you with disdain if you don't know better. In other words, they put you in a situation that they then kick you in and fault you for being in the first place. In other words, they're creating the situation that they must, the bed that they're creating, they must sleep in, but they oftentimes then combine this with a certain degree of insulting. In other words, there's a sort of a hush component of complaining or faulting others. And once again, they can't see the flick in their own eye for the flick of others. In other words, they can't see their own lack. They can only see the lack of others. And oftentimes these are the people who will subtly say that others are stupid, they're slow, they don't get it. Why aren't you further, from where you should be in your life? So there can be a certain degree of haranguing or belittlement when you're around this very needy covert narcissist. In other words, they're faulting you for satisfying their needs. They're faulting you for saying, why don't you do this, be this way. They have the fault finders, they are the subtle fault finders. They're very good at this, but they won't ever speak up. They'll only sort of kind of keep this harbored within, and then you'll see it sort of play out when they get really annoyed or frustrated, and then you see this other side of them, or they tend to watch, extremely opinionated TV that sort of is contradictory to their quiet, aloof, or withdrawing nature. In other words, there's a lot of aggressive politics or things of this nature. So it can be, it can be a slow-moving process to heal from this, especially the great degree of worry that tends to permeate being constantly needed, because if there's a sort of a covert clinginess which creates the trauma bond, and your mind is then geared or connected to always trying to find their solutions, and they take advantage of this. They take advantage of this nature, that you are always there for them, always going to put up with things. There's a high degree of sort of feeling like you have to tolerate things with this personality type. And, the flame can't go out in a trauma bond because that becomes all too familiar and all you know. So it's very difficult to break the mold or break the pattern and break the thought patterns that surround being with a covert narcissist, because you become, basically, you have to step out. You have to step out of that role. You have to step out of that shell of a person or that form of a person that you have been to them. In other words, you have to say, you have to look at what makes you happy and then realize that your happiness is not incorporated with how you've been treated. In other words, it cannot simultaneously exist. You can't simultaneously be infuriated and then grow and feel self-worth and self-esteem in your life. It just does not mix. It's like oil and water. So it's very, it's separating from them and then separating yourself and distinguishing yourself from this individual and how they've made you feel, and to stop identifying with that clingy, I'm always taking care of you role. It's like saying, I'm not going to pick up the phone and babysit you. I'm not going to, always, hollow myself out and humiliate myself in order to constantly be walked on and only hear about you. How is your day? How is your health? Da 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 da. In other words, to create a genuine interest, you have to let go of the worry and the disregard that has come from that and say, that is not me. You can't wear that internally anymore. It's literally like getting a new makeover internally. And that new makeover really comes, and I would advise, if you have been so trauma bonded and connected to always satisfying another's needs, in other words, you go out and you're always thinking about them, or you're thinking about their health, or you're constantly trying to think of ways to impress them, and you're sort of depressing yourself at the same time. It is to understand that really impressing yourself now is what you need to do. You need to impress yourself with how good you're making yourself feel. And the hard thing is that you need to share it then with others who can validate it and enhance that versus, doubt it, make you feel guilty for being happy. That's part of the disconnect, is there is a real sense in the neediness of the covert narcissist that your happiness is a threat to them. Your happiness, they don't know what to do with. Their separateness and your personal growth is intimidating to them. Is the covert narcissist jealous? Well, they kind of need you to keep them on this pedestal. So if you take, out your little block that you've been propping them up on, they're going to have to stand on their own. And then you need to take that block and then put it into your own foundation, your own, and kind of work on what it is that you want. And then surround yourself with people who are then enhancing and agreeable to and exchange pleasantries with you, and you don't feel this sort of guilt or this cramping of your style, because there's a covert narcissist who will always, kind of bring up the past and hold things against you. So you can never really sort of separate and get into that present moment. And healing from this supply role, healing from this uncommunicative role, healing from this negated role, this diminished role, where you've been minimized or always acquiescing to the needs of another, always, wearing the role of the support person. I'm the one who does the dishes. I'm the custodian here. I'm the leaf picker upper. You always feel like you're this indentured servant, and it doesn't mean you can't work and you can't, help to take care of them or be there for them or, be there in their time of need, but it's the balance, it's the amount, it's the growth that you're siphoned off from that is the issue. In other words, where they don't want to hear about the grown, healed you. They can't meet you there. They can't match you energetically. And that is a problem, because if you have negated your personal stance, really where it's become minimized. In other words, if part of my message today is if you look at kind of the big picture of your life and you're sort of meek, depressed, feeling weak, that learned helplessness, where you don't know who you are, you don't recognize your own needs, you don't recognize your own interests, you can't go there. In other words, because you're so held back by the trauma bond, by the fact that you always feel like you always need to improve yourself, that you don't feel good about how you look, you're not feeling good energetically, you need, part of that is the worry that comes from the acceptance, like, yes, I can make it, I can self-regulate, I can self-monitor myself, and I can acknowledge and validate my needs that are, especially when it comes to relationships. And that's just one part of it, but the core of the foundation is really energetically getting into that wider stance. So if you look at body language and where the subconscious mind really works is in the body itself. The body is the subconscious mind. So subconsciously, a lot of people will be very meek. They won't have their shoulders up. They won't be looking up. They'll be very round-shouldered, and their feet will be planted on the ground. Sometimes, wobbly, but always very close together, a very sort of undominant foot placing. So if you look at your foot placing, it's important to widen your stance. In other words, when you stand up, widen your feet so that they're square with your shoulders, and maybe brought in just a touch, but really get some more of a dominant footing of your own physical body. Begin to open up and not be judgmental, because you can just do this and you can just feel how judgmental that feels. Your body is a subconscious mind. So beginning to recognize your needs begins with having a more dominant stance. Because if you've been in a trauma bond with a covert narcissist, you've taken the submissive route, you've taken the down road, you've taken the low road, you've taken the I don't matter road, and that leads to unhappiness, that leads to poverty, that learns to feeling meek, and meek will inherit the earth. If there's a viewer who wants to interpret that, but there's a certain helplessness, which is you need to kind of rise up and live in more of the kingdom, God's kingdom, which is like the good life, the good stuff, and becoming more detached. So becoming more detached in this stance, meaning I'm not so connected to how I have to be on this one day. I'm not so connected with the outcome. I can detach from situations. I can release judgment. It's a hot day, it's a cold day, it's a windy day, it's a quiet, there's all these definitions that can throw you off of your foundation. It can throw you off of feeling that you have a grip on things. It's the stability that comes in that growth journey. And so when you're learning to detach and have a foundation, you're having a foundation which is not based in the trauma bond. It's not based in supply status. It's not based on how you relate to this one disordered individual, who you've become too enmeshed with, too clingy, too close. Their needs are your needs. There's a codependency issue. We are talking about detaching yourself as an individual and knowing it is safe, it is okay, and this is where it's at. And you can be there, and life will provide for you with that. So looking first at your foothold. Now, I don't have a video going on my feet, but underneath my chair here are my knees, and my knees are this far apart, and my feet are planted firmly in a wider stance. So think about when you go through your days of having a little bit wider stance, and just becoming more aware of the power that is in your legs. And do a little bit of walking. When I talk about resensitizing yourself, you need to get some new energy in how you carry yourself. There is a great TED Talk on YouTube by Amy. It's not coming to me right now. Amy Gertie, but she has a great TED Talk on the power stances and power body language. So when we talk about detaching completely from the trauma bond, you can practice this on your recovery dates. Is becoming more individuated and becoming more conscious and aware of the power in your own body. We have trillions and trillions and trillions of cells, and energy and motion fills your body oftentimes. And sometimes if you are feeling unsure of yourself or plagued with self-doubt, then you might have, sort of unstable footing. You might kind of keep your feet too close together, like scrunched up like this when you stand. Begin to widen your stance a little bit. You can try it right now where you stand up and you just hold yourself very erect, and you're getting a more dominant foot stance. So begin to become conscious of that and make this adaptation. This is a very good way for you to, be dominant, and stop, crossing your body, because then you're crossing the energy flow that flows through your body, and you're keeping it sort of on a trauma bond level where you're sort of wrapped up in the fetal position. You know, you see a lot of people, sometimes they got so many things all tied up, you know, they got their feet wrapped around their legs 3 times. You're like, how does your foot even do that? Like, you know, work on your body language. This was a huge, huge help to me in my healing journey, because I was, you know, in studying, I would have so much tension through my college years. You know, I was so focused. I mean, I would be the person who would be Friday nights at the study hall, you know, with everyone else who didn't have any social life. You know, there was, you know, people from all different countries in the study hall, and I was like the only English speaking person, but I would still be trying to study and read my books, and I would be so tense. And I would always be trying to, you know, stay on track this way. And so what's important for me and through my studies is to learn how important open body language is to practice, especially when you're watching a video like this. Sometimes people curl up, you know, but in your recovery date, I want you to practice and become more aware of detaching from the trauma bond in its entirety, detaching from the trauma bond, beginning to really no longer identify with that role. In other words, the one who always has to be there. What if, you know, something happens? It's like that fear, that worry, that guilt. It's learning to really subtly say, I am here for myself. I'm going to catch myself if I need to fall. And that is breaking free from the trauma bond. Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, on all levels. Begins with really understanding the physiology, and then the neurophysiology that comes, and then the thought process. So we're getting in deep here. So your foothold should have a wider foot stance. And your feet, you know, you should have your open body position without your hands crossed, without your arms crossed, your legs crossed. You're not blocking anything, because when you're doing that, you know, you're putting up judgment, you're sending the physical message that you don't want to be interacted with, that you're hurt, that you're weak, that you're judgmental. It's sending out a negative message. So when you sit and alter your body language so that it is open, you're able to receive things that are more than I deserve and positive self-esteem level, and communicate from there and be able to grow from there. And when you do that in safe circumstances, you know, you don't want to, you know, hold yourself vulnerable and open to people who are going to take advantage of you. That's where discernment takes place. You have to, in your healing, it is also about becoming discerning. So let's get back to the body language and feeling that, and knowing that your body is a temple. There are people who over-obligate themselves. They're giving themselves up to the defense mechanisms, the coping mechanisms. That will take a lot of physical energy from you, to constantly be having to defend and justify, not only through communication, through the fighting, the spats, the negative self-talk, the I don't matter, I don't look good, you know, surrounding yourself with people who are always bringing up the past against you. I mean, how can you ever shake it free? It's like a blanket that you know, it's just rough and it has all sorts of wood in it, and you can't shake the wood out. They're always trying to bring the past back to haunt you and splinters your experience, where you always feel like they're always getting under your skin. So that the covert narcissist will do that to keep you in a trauma bond. They will insinuate specific things, or oftentimes it's just a look, or the fact that they're not emotionally available for you. So let's just look at emotion availability. You need to make yourself emotionally available to yourself. So it's practicing that I am okay and I can live in the present. So I find that there's a perpetual habit that tends to take on a life of its own, almost like a spinning wheel that just, if you were, like there was that soccer match that the guy just won and he just kept sliding and sliding and sliding. That's really kind of what, and it's like amazing. I'm like, is this a video alterated? You know, if you click on some of these ads here in the videos, or you see some of the other videos, they have some neat, really neat advertising. In fact, just real quick as a sidestep, I had a viewer who said, there are ads, well, click on the ads because you can find something that's of interesting to you. I mean, it can be anything from a connection to something that you had previously studied, or different subscriptions to different topics like Gaia and the website building. Click on some of those and check them out. There was a really neat one on soccer where the guy, he scored like this amazing goal at the end of the game, and he was just like, he was on this grass, and I think he has knee pads, but he just kept sliding and sliding and sliding. He just kept going. The trauma bond is kind of like that, where even though that person is no longer there, it just keeps flowing through your being. It just keeps sliding and sliding and sliding its way through subconsciously, that you must always be attending to the needs of this person. In other words, you can't detach. So really the story of healing is about detaching. And it's about saying, I am not afraid to be. I'm not afraid to be alone. I'm not afraid to be me. And when you do that and you get this power stance, in other words, where your stance is a little bit wider and more commanding. It's having a commanding presence. It's people in business who are very good leaders have a commanding presence. Your leaders, the Pope, they have an energy about them. This will help you energetically in the etheric field to send out the right message. I can't be messed with. That is what you want to do. You want to be able to communicate the fact and bring it to, this person's attention, if they're still in your environment, that I can't be messed with. And you're sending the message, when you're always taking care of them, that, they are too needy. They're too clingy. They're blowing up your phone, whatever it is. When you kind of come from a clarity that is practiced in the recovery date, you're able to gain the clarity through repetition and experience that you know what's up. You know what's going on. You're not part of that game. They're on the wrong side of the tracks, and you ain't going there no more. You don't want to live on the bad side of the tracks. Been there, done that, got the tattoo, got the t-shirt, got the haircut, whatever it is, got the kid, I don't want that anymore. It's to say that no longer belongs to me, that problematic lifestyle. And it's like it's an engineered chaos, and you need to extract yourself from the chaos. You need to pull yourself energetically away and cut it off. Cut off energetically. If you can imagine like an energetic cord that's connecting you, it doesn't mean you're disconnecting from humanity, but you're disconnecting from the trauma bond, because the trauma bond is an energy. It's a way of feeling. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of perceiving. It's a way of being conscious. It's your awareness. Your awareness is your number one most important thing that you have. It is your lifeline. It is your awareness to the higher being. It's awareness to what is going on. It's a self-awareness. And when you do that, and you have that just kind of sort of clear, here, present, and you're then getting that energy together that I can't be messed with. I can't be tampered with. I'm not being reduced to an indentured servant. I'm not being reduced to the small person who you think I am. I'm actually, I've got a higher purpose. I've got a higher presence. I am in higher learning, and that is what I'm about. And if you can't meet me there, then, you're going to have to go somewhere else. So it's a detaching of that role and that feeling and that awareness. So when you then come into the positive, you're in the positive expectation that then you will command the solutions, the answers, the experiences that you are then working with to improve yourself energetically. Because bottom line, when we talk about working through a covert narcissist and understanding their need for supply, even though it doesn't look like it, when you really get clarity and you really detach, you can see it from a bird's eye level, and that you had a role to participate in that. So now you have to unenroll. You have to unsubscribe to that philosophy of being less than, of being in that role. So you have to pattern interrupt yourself. And if you can use your imagination, because your conscious, is your imagination. And like Einstein said, it's 1% imagination, 99% perspiration is what he's referring to. And that's, we're focusing on the 1%. I don't know about you all, but I want to be in the 1%. I want to be in the top 1%. I want to live in inspiration. I want to live in clarity. I want to live in purpose. I want to live in significance. And I want to learn in a balanced format. And so when you make that commitment to yourself, you detangle yourself from the trauma bond. You really do separate yourself energetically, and you no longer live in the worry. You're bathing yourself in comfort and peace and harmony and getting along with the people who you never thought you could get along with. The bosses, the managers, the people who have it together in life. You know, you are one of those people. You are now on the right path. You're now hanging out with better friends. You're listening to better music. Or maybe you're just going on your recovery date, and that is socialization enough. Maybe you are one who needs to learn how to be alone. You know, if you are in that place where you can't always be alone, then you're sort of carrying the torch of the covert narcissist. In other words, you're saying, I don't have the clarity, I don't have the physiology that helps me to become dominant and get into that bigger picture, and not feel bad if I'm not into the same things that they're into. It's okay that if you're, not into the baseball or the scary movies or the crime drama or the 5 o'clock news, you are into other things, and that is okay, and that is the good life. So when you finally realize that, you can say, amen, I can rise up in the castles of old. I can live for my own peaceful perspective, and then you're in a growing. Growing for you will be different things. It's different for each person. But growing is really eventually how you feel, how you conduct your life, how you get yourself together, and especially energetically, you don't feel the fear, you don't feel the paranoia, you don't feel that you're being judged, because once you release the trauma bond, you're released from judgment. You're out of that dual thinking of me and them, and you're better and I'm worse. You're letting go of that duplicitous thinking. And that is really part of healing through the trauma bond and getting out of that supply role, is to detach energetically and get that firm body plan where you're in a state of positive neutrality, if you will. It's a feeling of awareness and clarity where your mind kind of slows down, your thoughts are no longer so chaotic, you're more efficient with your movement, you're efficient with your breathing, everything is cohesive, you're congruent